The night Craig Dyson showed up grinning with his blazer slung over his shoulder like a Wall Street Ken doll, I already knew I'd be ignored. Again. He was the fixer, the one they brought in when investors started circling like sharks, and the old systems weren't sexy enough for quarterly slides. We were halfway through implementing the Beacon Initiative, a sleek name for a bloated, over-engineered mess of vendor contracts, API integrations, and third-party middleware that nobody wanted to maintain. I had a line-by-line understanding of how the back-end functioned, because someone had to, and I wasn't much for office politics or avocado toast conferences. I just wanted things to work, and work right. 2 nights before that, I caught a mismatch in the vendor API logs. Timestamps were off by 3 seconds. Not a huge deal, unless you knew what that implied. Someone had either bypassed the standard transaction validation or tried to mask batch operations. I flagged it, logged it, sent a short internal memo with screenshots, tracebacks, and a red-line summary. Nobody responded, not even a canned thanks. It disappeared into the same silence that always swallowed my cautions. The truth is, most people don't like questions unless they can turn the answers into a bonus. Before we go further, I've got to say this real quick. If you're into quiet takedowns and stories where the underdog isn't loud but still wins, hit that subscribe button and like the video. 97% of people who watch these stories don't subscribe, and I get it, you're busy. But it helps more than you know and keeps this madness going. All right, back to the chaos. I worked in a tucked-away corner on the 4th floor, where the printer always jammed and the AC sounded like it was powered by a dying goat. No window, no plants, no motivational quotes in cursive. Just dual monitors, 3 compliance dashboards, and a sticky note with my VPN token passphrase. I liked it that way. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to keep the machine from quietly eating itself. Fenwick systems ran fast, but sloppily, like a drunk intern in stilettos. Someone had to keep track of what didn't add up before it imploded. Craig came in like he owned the place by the end of day 1. His first staff meeting involved a whiteboard. The word urgency circled 5 times, and a lot of hand-waving. He made vague promises about streamlining workflows and burning through obstacles, which, translated, meant ignore safeguards, cut corners, and silence anyone asking for receipts. I kept my head down, logged everything, and built a private folder called FW4Red on my encrypted drive. Just in case. Nobody noticed I was the only one still in the building after 9 p.m. 4 nights a week. Or that I manually reconciled discrepancy reports when our automated tools failed, which they often did because we cheaped out on licensing. Or that I reflagged the same vendor signature misalignments 3 separate times and added a note. Appears scrubbed. Recommend trace audit. No reply. Once in the break room, I overheard someone from finance joke that I was that ghost with a clipboard. I smiled. Ghosts see everything. They also don't need your approval to do the right thing. When the internal systems team updated the routing layer without informing compliance, a few calls got missed. Nothing fatal, but I documented it. Then came the override. A system-level credential executed a vendor change from an exec floor IP address. No ticket, no approval trail. I flagged it immediately, sent it to Craig's inbox with a subject line that simply read, "Urgent. Possible credential misuse." His reply? Silence. Then 3 days later, a forwarded email from his assistant. Meeting invite removed. No longer required. That was my first signal. But back then, I still believed that diligence mattered more than visibility. That if I did my job well enough, someone would eventually care about the red flags. That competence would win over charisma. God, I was tired of being wrong. Craig Dyson had a neck vein that pulsed every time someone asked for clarification. I started counting it like a tell at a poker table. By the third time, he barked, "We don't have time for red tape." I realized he wasn't bluffing. He meant it. He didn't just dislike questions. He treated them like betrayals. In his world, the fastest answer was always the right one, and process was something you brute forced your way around, like a door with a "Do Not Enter" sign taped to it. If he could shove it open with his elbow and a smile, he'd do it and call it innovation. The Beacon Initiative was our Hail Mary, a Frankenstein system meant to consolidate 3 platforms, 2 billing vendors, and the client-side portal into one shiny dashboard we could parade in front of Series C investors. Behind the scenes, it was more duct tape than architecture. Beacon wasn't ready. Hell, it wasn't even stable. But Craig didn't care about stability. He cared about dates and headlines, and being the guy whose LinkedIn banner could say, "Scaled Enterprise Systems 3x ahead of timeline." My official title didn't change, but suddenly I was looped in as the compliance and audit lead for Beacon. That meant I was expected to sit in silence, nod a lot, and retroactively bless whatever shortcuts Craig had already taken. I did my job. I monitored user actions, tracked vendor changes, verified logins, and started a second notebook I kept in my desk drawer, pen and paper only, not digital, because I didn't trust the cloud or the people controlling it. The first real red flag was buried inside a version update notice from one of our smaller vendors, QuickFrame. I'd seen their contracts before, boilerplate stuff with specific audit trails and data use limitations. But the new version Craig had fast-tracked, stripped all that out. No signature on file, no ticket ID. Just a revised contract uploaded to our SharePoint instance, dated 5 days after he had met with their CEO at that rooftop cocktail party the rest of us weren't invited to. I printed both versions, highlighted the clause about indemnification that had magically disappeared, stapled a post-it to the top that read, "No approval log. Who authorized this?" Then I slid it into my desk drawer. That same day, I overheard Craig chewing out a QA analyst for flagging too many bugs. "You're slowing us down," he snapped. "Find fixes, not problems." The room went quiet. No one defended her. She left early and didn't come back the next day. I started triple backing my logs. Every time a change request came through with the wrong metadata, I saved a screenshot and filed it under a folder I labeled Watchtower. I made no noise about it, didn't challenge anyone in meetings, just nodded, took my notes, and kept my tone neutral. That's how women like me survive in places like this. You learn to be invisible until it's time not to be. Craig's brand of leadership spread fast. His people mimicked him. Meetings turned into performance theater. Questions were met with side eyes or thinly veiled sarcasm. "Oh, look, Monica's got another observation," someone joked once. I smiled back and said nothing, just clicked my pen and added a new line to my notes. But the things I was finding weren't jokes. Vendor metadata missing timestamps, internal transactions logged under recycled credential IDs, Manual overrides without two-factor authentication. Each one small enough to write off. Together, a damn landmine field. Still, I didn't escalate. Not officially. I wasn't going to throw myself into the buzzsaw for people who'd already decided I was furniture. Instead, I documented. I watched. I waited. Because I knew this kind of momentum always hits a wall. The question wasn't if, it was when. And I wanted to be ready when it did. It was a Thursday when it snapped. Not in some cinematic, chair-throwing, how dare you kind of way. Just a slow-building pressure that finally hissed through the cracks. Craig had scheduled what he called a sync, but what everyone else knew meant a performance review dressed up as a brainstorming session. 14 people, 1 whiteboard, 3 passive-aggressive muffins, and a clock ticking toward his next meeting with the C-suite. I came in with 2 printouts and 3 flagged issues, credential inconsistencies across 3 vendor handoffs, a missing confirmation receipt for a key transaction, and a log gap that suggested a silent rollback had occurred last Friday, on Craig's watch. "Who's got blockers?" he asked. I raised my hand halfway. "We still don't have credential lineage for the QuickFrame override. It's missing dual auth and—" He cut me off. "Jesus, Monica. Every time it's something." I felt the air shift. No one looked up. One guy even coughed like he was trying to drown out the moment. Craig waved a hand like he was clearing a chalkboard. "Look, compliance is important, but this project doesn't need another bottleneck. We're already behind. We need momentum, not paranoia." I didn't speak, just stared at him. He didn't flinch. "You're off the project, effective immediately. Too many questions." There it was, public, cold, meant to sting. I gathered my binder, my pens, the annotated logs I knew no one else had bothered to cross-check, and walked out. Not fast, not flustered, just quiet. I heard Craig say something like, "We'll follow up," but I didn't look back. Back at my desk, I packed slowly. No one said anything. I was the cautionary tale now, the one who asked too much and got pushed out for it. I opened my personal encrypted drive, unplugged from the corporate network, air-gapped and silent like a priest in confession, and created a folder. Red List FW4. Inside, I dumped every flagged report, every mismatch, every exported snapshot of system anomalies, sorted by vendor, date, and type. I even added a few internal Slack transcripts, just headers, not messages, metadata patterns. People forget that sometimes the shape of the silence is more telling than the sound itself. Then I zipped it, encrypted it with a one-time 256-bit key. Backed that up to an old USB drive I kept taped inside the spine of a retired audit log binder from 2019, page 47. No one ever checked the old binders. They were decorative compliance, like the fake plants in the lobby. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I walked down the hall with my coffee mug and my notebook like it was any other day. But my ears rang the way they do when you slam a car door too hard and your body's not ready for it. The thing about being dismissed like that, out loud in front of others, isn't the humiliation. It's the clarity. Everything that was blurry before, your place in the hierarchy, the respect you thought you'd earned, the illusion of professionalism, snaps into focus. They didn't care what I knew. They just wanted me quiet. But I hadn't built my career on being loud. I'd built it on remembering, on noticing what everyone else missed, on knowing where the real records were and how to keep them safe. And now, for the first time, I knew exactly what to do with that. I kept my mouth shut, but my eyes open. From my quiet little exile in vendor reconciliation, an afterthought department so far off the Beacon Initiative radar, it may as well have been on Pluto. I watched the whole damn circus barrel forward, like a freight train powered by spreadsheets and ego. Craig's streamlined launch plan began hitting snags almost immediately, but no one called them that. No, in Beacon speak, everything was a momentary latency or a logging optimization opportunity. Which is corporate for, we're duct taping over the engine light again, boys. By week 2 of my removal, 2 key APIs were silently throttling data under high load. I knew because I still had passive read access to internal sync reports. Not because I was spying, but because nobody remembered to revoke my permissions. Classic oversight. There's a reason I trust the logs more than I trust people. One Monday, I saw a flagged sync failure between our core billing node and vendor number 3. The error? Authentication fallback triggered, secondary user ID applied, which is sanitized code for someone with admin access manually forced a connection, probably Craig, or someone who thought root access was just a fun way to say they were important. I laughed out loud, alone at my desk. It wasn't funny, but it was. I started making a new list, not the neat, orderly kind for audits. The kind you jot on the back of a napkin when you realize you're watching a building burn in slow motion and someone's still inside saying, "Everything's fine, just a little smoke." I listed 3 dates where anomalies happened. 1 sync failure, 1 manual credential override, and 1 stealth rollback. Then I added 2 transaction codes I'd memorized, because once you see something sketchy happen under your credentials, you don't forget. Then I opened a new Proton Mail account. Burner. No ID, no trail. Subject line. Cross-check these before next week's board review. Body. Just the 3 dates, 2 codes. No salutation, no threat, no signature. I sent it to the general compliance inbox and CC'd the company's external audit liaison address that I'd bookmarked months ago. Not because I was trying to be heroic, but because if someone else out there still gave a damn, I wanted them to have the breadcrumbs before they got buried. Then I closed the tab, stood up, and made myself a cup of tea strong enough to strip paint. From the outside, Beacon looked on track. Internal comms were still full of hollow cheerleading, proud to be part of this transformation. Craig is killing it. Week 4, 98% complete. But I could read the cracks. The QA team started dropping from Slack channels mid-week. The change logs had time gaps that looked like someone was pushing hotfixes straight to production without staging. Error reports were down, not because errors stopped, but because Craig's team had disabled verbose logging to make it easier to demo. They weren't building a system, they were building a facade. I'd seen sturdier integrity in a Jenga tower at a frat party. And the part that really chafed? Watching it happen and knowing the exact points of failure before they failed. I didn't want to be right. I wanted to be wrong and paranoid and ignored for good reason. But every passing day just reinforced the truth. The things I flagged weren't noise. They were warnings. And Craig had silenced the alarms, like he was hitting snooze on a fire drill. Still, I said nothing. I logged out quietly, smiled when I passed him in the hall, drank my tea, watched the edges of the Beacon dashboard begin to flicker with contradictions and chaos. They thought they could outrun accountability. But logs don't forget. And neither do I. It started with a calendar invite that hit every senior director's inbox at 7:03 a.m. on a Monday. Subject: Urgent Compliance Review, Beacon Initiative. Attendees: External Audit Team, Grant and Maynard LLP, Internal Oversight, Legal, Craig Dyson, others. TBA location, 6th floor glass conference room. Time, 9:30 a.m. The entire floor vibrated with corporate dread, the kind that smells like burnt toner and last-minute printouts. No one said audit out loud, but you could read it in the way people shut their laptops a little faster and switched Slack statuses to in a meeting before anyone asked questions. Something had tripped the wire. Craig didn't show up for his usual 8:15 performance lap with coffee and fake camaraderie. His assistant stood outside his office like a sentry, stiff as drywall, telling anyone who knocked that he was in preparation. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. But I did open my compliance dashboard out of sheer curiosity, and sure enough, activity spike. A flurry of log pulls, archival retrievals, and access requests flying between departments like desperate pigeons trying to reconstruct a paper trail they'd spent a month pretending didn't exist. At 9:48 a.m., Craig's voice rose through the thin conference room walls. "I don't know what that is," he snapped. "We didn't build that report. I've never seen that file name in our production branch." A pause. Must have been something the junior analysts played with in staging. Can we focus on what actually shipped? I imagined the audit lead blinking once, maybe twice. She didn't raise her voice, just replied coolly, "It was pulled from your production logs using your credential ID, time-stamped 2 days before go-live." Dead air. By lunch, everyone was whispering. Engineering had gone full blackout. Finance was reviewing procurement invoices like they were trying to spot bloodstains. HR was mysteriously unavailable for the afternoon. And me? I microwaved my leftover mushroom risotto and read the office chatter like a tabloid. I hadn't sent a second message. I didn't need to. Because 2 days earlier, a very specific USB drive arrived in a plain padded envelope at the reception desk. No return address, just a printed label, for external audit only. It made its way, eventually, to the lead auditor, Marianne Hale, a woman with the calm, razor-clean energy of someone who drank her coffee black and read data trees for fun. When she opened the drive, she found exactly what I meant for her to find. Time-stamped logs, version histories, rollback records, user tracebacks, and a full side-by-side diff between the original vendor contract terms and the ones Beacon deployed live. Every file in the package was verifiable. Every signature mapped to a credential. Every timestamp cross-checked with the internal version control system. And none of it was manipulated. It didn't have to be. Truth doesn't need makeup. By 3 p.m., Craig was blaming an intern who'd quit 2 weeks ago. By 3:30, legal had asked IT to verify who accessed what and when. That's when things really started falling apart, because the system logs don't just record access, they record intention, access patterns, frequency, sessions. And when someone pulls sensitive files after midnight from an exec floor IP address and overwrites an older version without a commit note, that's not a fluke. That's a decision. Word came down around 4 p.m. that Grant and Maynard was extending their review indefinitely. All PTO requests for the next 2 weeks were frozen. engineering was told to prepare annotated summaries of every change made in the last 90 days. The mood? Grim, as if everyone knew a bloodletting was coming, but couldn't tell which side of the blade they'd land on. I stayed quiet, sat at my desk, typed a few vendor review notes like it was any other Monday. But inside, I felt the tension tightening like a piano wire. Not satisfaction, not yet. Just the knowledge that the arc was bending, finally, and the people who'd turned me into a non-entity were now frantically trying to reconstruct the very questions I'd asked before they told me to shut up. Truth doesn't panic, but liars always do. 2 days into the audit and the office had the energy of a sinking cruise ship. HR walked around like funeral ushers. Craig hadn't been seen outside the 6th floor conference room since Tuesday morning, and IT looked like they were one caffeine short of mutiny. Everyone was praying to whatever gods they believed in that they hadn't clicked the wrong file, signed the wrong contract, or ignored the wrong Slack ping. But it was the silence that got them, the kind that follows a bomb, not before it. I watched from my seat in reconciliation, headphones in, music off. I wasn't eavesdropping, didn't need to. The audit team wasn't subtle. When the hallway door swung open and Marianne Hale stepped out with a printout thick enough to be considered a blunt weapon, no one made eye contact. What I knew, what they were just discovering, was that none of it was theoretical. Inside that folder were printouts of flagged logs, flagged before the launch, before the investor preview, before the fake fixes and duct tape and gaslighting. They had dates, timestamps, system IDs, credential fingerprints. And in the metadata, my internal ID, buried but intact. Not the user-facing name, of course. Craig had made sure of that when they deleted my report off the internal system, but he didn't know how deep the logs went, or that the backup folder, the one labeled Red List FW4, had been preserved, once online, once offline. And when they cracked that backup open, when they scanned the document properties, author M. Reyes modified, never created. Timestamp matched exactly to the day Craig removed me from the project. The logs showed a pattern of escalating issues, the kind that couldn't be brushed off as junior analyst confusion or test environment bugs. They documented credential misuse, unsanctioned contract swaps, 2 suspicious rollbacks, and 3 system overrides, all before the project ever went live. And every one of them was annotated. There wasn't a single editorial word, no commentary, no emotion, just technical facts, highlighted, numbered, and notated in plain English. A trail of digital breadcrumbs with no excuses and no opinion, just truth in its rawest form. And now that trail had a name. They tried to figure it out without saying it. I watched a director shuffle past my desk, shoot me a glance like he was checking if I'd grown horns or sprouted wings. Someone from legal whispered something to HR in the hallway. Did she even say anything? And HR just shook her head. No, I didn't. I didn't shout. I didn't write an angry email. I didn't storm the glass room or call anyone out on Slack. I just left a trace, one they couldn't erase. Because even when you delete the report, even when you push someone out for asking the wrong questions, even when you rewrite the narrative and try to bury the record under a pile of deadlines and denial, truth doesn't vanish. It waits. Marianne delivered her findings to legal in a sealed envelope. I saw Craig get called into a closed-door meeting around 4:00 p.m. He came out looking like someone had punched him in the gut through a spreadsheet. I packed up at 5 on the dot. No need to stay late. The work was already done. The building buzzed around me, tense, twitching, teetering, every footstep heavy, every keyboard stroke echoing like a drumbeat in a tomb. And still I said nothing. I didn't need to. By Friday morning, Craig was on his third emergency meeting before most of the office had finished their coffee. He looked like hell, shirt wrinkled, jaw clenched, the glossy shine of that untouchable confidence scrubbed raw. Gone was the charming, visionary act. What sat in the 6th-floor conference room now was a cornered animal in a too-tight suit, trying to bluff his way through a minefield of timestamps. The investors had been briefed. Not by choice, of course. Someone on the board had caught wind of the audit expansion and demanded clarity before the Monday investor Q&A. And once the phrase pre-launch compliance gaps made it into the prep deck, it was all downhill from there. A quiet storm turned into a 5-alarm fire. By 11:22 a.m., Craig was face-to-face with Grant and Maynard's forensic lead and Fenwick's general counsel, sifting through the logs he'd tried to bury. Every page told the same story. He'd seen the warnings. He'd overwritten them. And when that didn't work, he'd deleted the record and pushed the launch anyway. But here's the thing about corporate memory. It has layers. Surface files can be rewritten. Databases can be scrubbed. But if you know where the real metadata lives, the back-end logs, version trees, system fingerprints, then you know the past doesn't disappear. It gets preserved, archived, frozen in amber with every click, save, and upload traceable. The Red List FW4 archive had never been modified, not once. The audit team confirmed it, file creation timestamp, exact to the second, from the day I was pulled off the Beacon project. No edits, no tampering, no gaps, just a perfectly sealed record of what he'd tried to erase. When legal asked him, flat out, who flagged this first? Craig didn't answer at first, just sat there blinking, shoulders rising like the weight of it had finally landed square on his chest. He flipped through the annotated logs with trembling fingers, reading his own downfall in my clean, silent notes. Every entry was dated, every discrepancy highlighted, every credential tied to a user ID that matched a traceable digital fingerprint, and every one had been submitted before my removal from the project. "You knew," Marianne Hale said, her voice steady as a scalpel. He glanced up, wild-eyed. It didn't seem. But it was, legal cut in, and you suppressed it. They let that sit for a full 10 seconds. Then came the kicker. Who first documented these anomalies? Craig looked down at the folder again, saw the ID tags, the metadata, the name that refused to disappear no matter how many times he tried to white it out. He closed his eyes. Her. That's all he said. Not my name, just her. Like I was the ghost haunting his house, the thing that wouldn't stay buried. By noon, the board had convened a closed session. Investor calls were postponed. A partner from our parent firm had flown in from Chicago and was already in a black SUV outside the building. Craig didn't come back after his 1 p.m. call with them. Rumors said he left through the parking garage with a banker's box and his phone switched off. People kept stopping by my desk that afternoon, pretending to need things. Old reports, vendor lists, a contract template from Q2. Nobody said it, but they were all looking for the same thing, confirmation. Was it really me? The one they pushed out for slowing things down? The one they stopped inviting to meetings? The one who hadn't said a damn word while the floor fell out beneath them? I handed over what they asked for, smiled politely, didn't gloat, didn't brag. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs patience. The formal hearing took place in the executive conference suite, the one with the frosted glass, the obscenely long table, and that fake ficus tree in the corner that had probably outlived 4 CEOs. Everyone was there. The board, legal, external audit, 2 investor reps, and a whole row of suits pretending not to be sweating through their tailored collars. The air smelled like toner and consequences. Craig sat at the far end, no blazer this time, sleeves rolled, tie loosened like even his wardrobe had given up. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just deflated. Like the scaffolding of confidence and power he built his persona on had finally buckled under its own weight. There was no whiteboard, no slogans, no momentum, not paranoia. Just a man staring down the sum total of his shortcuts. The lead auditor opened with a calm question. Before we move to remediation, we want the record to reflect one final clarification. Everyone in the room shifted slightly. You could feel it, the inhale before the punch. Who, she asked, logged the first flagged discrepancies in the beacon compliance sequence? Craig didn't answer at first. He rubbed his forehead like he might find a better version of the truth hidden in his hairline. But there was no escape hatch left. Just the unflinching metadata, the immutable record, and the silence that had wrapped itself around me like armor from the start. He raised a shaky hand and gestured, without words, toward the far corner of the building. My old desk, the one by the crooked AC vent and the jammed printer. Her, he muttered. A beat passed, then 2. I was already in the room, sitting quietly with legal. I hadn't spoken yet, hadn't been introduced. But now every pair of eyes turned my way like I'd just stood up at my own funeral. The board chair cleared his throat. Miss Reyes. Monica, I said softly. He gave a small nod. We'd like to offer you a permanent retainer agreement, compliance lead for system integrity oversight, not just Beacon, company-wide. I didn't smile, didn't flinch, just nodded once, measured. I accept. They offered to walk me through contract terms. I said I'd read them myself, twice. That got a chuckle. Light, nervous, a little grateful. Craig was dismissed from the room shortly after. No fanfare, no defense, just a low mutter of, "You'll hear from my attorney," that no one responded to. He collected his laptop and a folder full of excuses that wouldn't work on anyone anymore. The moment he left, a strange stillness settled over the room. Not victory, not even relief, just clarity. The systems would need rebuilding. The processes would need rewriting. And someone had to watch, not to point fingers, but to prevent the next beacon from happening under prettier names. That was the job now. Mine. And I would do it without a slogan, without a speech. Just the same way I always had, by seeing what others missed and remembering what they tried to forget. The tea was lukewarm by the time I remembered to drink it. Chamomile, with a splash of honey, nothing dramatic. Just the kind of thing you make when your hands still feel like they're holding weight, even though the moment's passed. Outside, the wind rattled the last of the fall leaves against my window, like it was trying to remind me winter was coming whether I was ready or not. But I was. For once, I was. My laptop sat open on the dining table, soft blue glow reflecting off the worn wood. No alerts, no urgent Slack messages, no quick favors from people who used to ignore my emails. Just the final file sitting quietly on my desktop, redlist fw4.zip. I hovered the cursor over it. There was no ceremony, no dramatic music, just a soft breath, a sip of tea, and a click. Then it was gone. The encrypted folder that carried the weight of a system's failure and a woman's silence, deleted. Because it had done what it needed to do. It had spoken when no one would, protected when no one cared. It had preserved the truth until someone finally looked close enough to see it. At Fenwick, things moved slower now, not in a bad way, in a deliberate one. The new compliance framework rolled out last week, quietly, without the usual banner ads or HR ice cream socials. Just an internal memo, a policy hub update, and a reference line in the doc footer. Version 1.0, Reyes Protocol. They didn't ask if they could use my name. They didn't need to. I recognized the formatting style, the section headers, the way the escalation paths were built backward from real-world failure instead of fantasy flowcharts. It was mine, the policy I'd once scribbled as an idea in a notebook during my exile. Now real, now company doctrine, no parade, no plaque, but it was enough. Because correction isn't about vindication. It's about fixing what they tried to pretend wasn't broken. I closed the laptop, finished my tea, and stood up. No lingering anger, no need for revenge. Just the clean, steady knowledge that the system had been changed. Not because I screamed, but because I didn't stop watching. They said I asked too many questions. Turns out, I just asked the right ones before anyone else had the guts to.